So by now you can probably see why my rabbit hole of thought on this topic started to freak me out. It's almost too crazy to think about. The Apple Vision Pro is about to change history. Just like when the first iPhone or Mac was introduced, this device will let you step into a whole new world that looks and feels real. Everyone knows this is the start of something big in VR, and Apple, as usual, is at the forefront. But with myself being a mix engineer and music producer, I can only imagine how this could change the way that we make music forever. I was at my college reunion at Canadian Music Week over the weekend for my audio school that I studied engineering and production at, and I was speaking with some of my former professors about where VR and AI could take the music industry. They said something really interesting, which was that when new technology such as the digital audio workstation came to replace tape recording and console mixing, those that had started on tape found that at first it was easier to just stick to what you know. And now pretty much all engineers have moved to the DAW, but many that started on analog gear will continue to use analog gear in a hybrid setup, even though there are plugins and new technologies that can arguably do the same thing and sometimes better in some cases. But the new generation always starts on the latest technology. And I'll be honest, I didn't start engineering on tape. I started in a DAW. But imagine growing up as a kid in the not too distant future and getting into music production. For many of us in my generation, we started on something like GarageBand. But imagine their version of GarageBand is using a DAW in VR or Apple Vision Pro. It won't happen overnight, the same way that the music industry hasn't changed from analog to digital overnight, but I can't ignore this thought exercise of where music production could go in the future. Now, I haven't seen any announcements, information, or other videos about this topic yet, so there's not much out there about this. We don't know much about whether a DAW like GarageBand or Logic Pro will be a feature of the Apple Vision Pro's current first version. However, it's only a matter of time before Apple integrates their creative tools and applications as usual. I've heard about the possibilities of Final Cut Pro, Apple's advanced video editor, being used in Vision Pro, similarly to the iPad version. So I would imagine GarageBand and Logic Pro are not far behind. It would start with those because they're native to Apple, but at some point other DAWs could catch up and be introduced as well. And all sorts of third-party softwares and VSTs could become compatible. It's in the talks that Apple is already partnering with other companies to make the VR experience collaborative, like something out of the movie Ready Player One. So all DAWs could eventually be available in VR one day. And that leads me to the question: what could a digital audio workstation and music production tools be like in VR? We don't know much about this at all, so I thought this video could be a really cool opportunity to imagine some scenarios about how music production could work in a VR or mixed reality environment. The more I sat and thought about this, the more strange it got. I went down a rabbit hole of imagination and thought of several scenarios that could be possible in the future of producing music in VR, and I want to describe those scenarios to you now. This video is going to be speculative, creative, exciting, and I also think extremely freaky. So let's explore these ideas that could enter the music production space in the distant or not too distant future. The first thought I had is, how could it even work? The Apple Vision Pro doesn't have a mouse or keyboard or plug-in MIDI controller. Well, I would imagine at first it would be something along the lines of Logic for iPad. More of a touchscreen type of look where editing could be something more or less of a tap and slice and pinch and zoom type of approach. If you've ever seen the Slate Raven interface, which is essentially a touchscreen that can run Pro Tools, it controls all your plugins and faders with no mouse, so that could be one way of imagining this. Except instead of a touch screen, it's with gesture-based editing. Now, it's said that the Apple Vision Pro has incredible eye tracking and physical tracking of your hands and fingers. So when it comes to playing parts, your MIDI controller could essentially be the empty desk or the empty air in front of you. It sounds like something that would be buggy at first, but who knows? because we've been surprised by new technology like this many times in the last few years. This led me to the next idea of an immersive studio environment. This is something that has been experimented with successfully in audio with software and headphones like Slate VSX. VSX is a listening model where you can change the studio you're mixing in with a whole ton of speaker emulations and room options. It's a bit like virtual reality for the ears. Now imagine Apple Vision Pro matching that with what you see. Imagine the entire visual space around you becomes a fancy professional studio and sounds like one too. And you could have options of which studios to enjoy your session and get creative in. The environment you can choose to have around you would change what you hear, and the room acoustics would change as well. And what could stay the same is just that floating digital audio workstation window in front of you. Now imagine you can jump into a car visually and also sonically check your mix in the car. Imagine you can step into the club and hear how hard your bass is pumping in the club. Imagine you can pop into Abbey Road Studios to do your final mix on their Neve console. Now let's take it one step further and imagine spatial audio mixing in VR, where the Vision Pro could have an intuitive way of mixing audio in a three-dimensional space. You would physically move around and hear the sound change as you turn your head the way it would be in real life. There are arguments about whether Dolby Atmos will take over the music industry one day, and why I personally think stereo will always be king for a variety of reasons. I can imagine the powerful combination of how Dolby Atmos and Apple Vision Pro could work together. Now, beyond just the studio environment, imagine how other visual elements could enhance the music making process. For example, your VR DAW could provide a visual representation of an audio waveform. Imagine seeing a physical looking waveform passing by you as you listen back to your recording. Or imagine stepping directly inside your spectral analysis EQ. How could we view audio data in a 3D space? Well, let's imagine plugins. What if your plugin wasn't just a plugin in front of you, but a plugin around you? To put it simply, imagine a visual element to your reverb plugin, adding a hall or church reverb, and all of a sudden you're visually in a church around you, and choosing between different churches to hear your vocal in, and seeing the environment change around you as you swipe through presets. The more I thought about this, the more I realized that plugins too could become an immersive 3D experience, with spatial effects with the audio processing. So by now you can probably see why my rabbit hole of thought on this topic started to freak me out. It's almost too crazy to think about. Let's take it one step further and jump back into the virtual studio. Imagine in these studio spaces there are realistic representations of instruments and recording equipment. Imagine your MIDI controller, but it doesn't look like a MIDI controller. It looks like a Steinway grand piano, and you're on the recording floor of Noble Street Studios here in Toronto. Imagine you can grab virtual mics and mic up that piano however you wanted. It would be this whole virtual instrument performance experience where the virtual piano tracks your hand movements and replicates the real sound and feel of that piano. Now, this might be weird with playing a MIDI piano with your fingers in the air, but I would bet you that they will create some type of compatible MIDI keyboard that you can physically play and maps that experience into what you see in your virtual environment. Now imagine they do this with those MIDI guitar controllers where the frets are just buttons. This isn't brand new technology, and it could be integrated. So next up, you're playing Eddie Van Halen's guitar in VR. Again, freaky to think about. Then, with grabbing different guitars off the shelf, I started to get thinking about collaboration. During the time of the pandemic, I was working with a lot of artists over Zoom, where I would share my screen and audio over Zoom so we could both work on a production together in a session. This made me think about how musicians and producers from different physical locations could come together to collaborate in a shared virtual environment. So what would that look like? Well, Apple has developed with their Vision Pro a pretty creepily accurate face modeling technology, which when combined with the eye tracking creates an animated version of yourself that can be broadcasted over FaceTime or video. Imagine if within the digital studio environment, someone else can get with you into that studio and their digital avatar appears. You can communicate by speaking in real time as if you were on a call, except you visually see them in the studio next to you. Maybe they have an idea for a part and they can walk over to your MIDI keyboard and lay it down with you. And the session could be collaborative so that the same DAW window that you see in front of you is the same one that they do. So you can edit and work together in the DAW as if you were in the same room. You could join the same digital session, and being together on the same cloud, you could share and upload tracks simultaneously and see each other's actions in real time. This could get really interesting, from recording together, producing together, and even songwriting. Let's step into the creative space of songwriting and performing for a moment. This next idea I had felt almost too crazy. From what we've seen of artificial intelligence, there have been some terrifyingly accurate AI models created of prominent public figures, like philosophers, historical figures, all sorts of celebrities, and musicians. AI has studied their mannerisms from thousands of hours of their content and analyzed their psychology, way of thinking, and the way they speak. Imagine some of the most documented artists and musicians being modeled by AI. Imagine getting into a studio or writing session where you can write with Paul McCartney sitting next to you. Obviously an AI-generated Paul McCartney. And this AI Paul McCartney is working with you and making suggestions for your song based off of what the real Paul McCartney might say if he was in a similar session. Now imagine they can do this with some of the greatest artists of all time that are no longer alive or with us, but are highly documented and studied to the point where AI models can be made. Or imagine working with some of the most prolific producers in their AI form, and they can help you finish your song. Now, this part could raise all sorts of ethical issues, and I, for the record, don't actually think that this would be a good idea. But the purpose of this video is to share with you openly where my thoughts took me when I thought deeply about what could be possible in this type of VR music production world. Now let's take it one step further and imagine you're having a bit of trouble in your VR DAW and maybe you need some help with your mix. What if I here at Audio Edges had VR tutorials for you, where I could get in the room with you and teach you how to use the DAW in VR, where I can teach you about mixing and you can come take a VR workshop with me, where you can come to my studio and learn with me in VR. I'm already here with you on your laptop or your phone, so imagine just having one-on-one lessons with me in VR, providing real-time feedback and showing you techniques up close. And what if we could sync exactly what we're seeing on our Vision Pro headsets, so you could watch exactly what I'm seeing as I'm doing it, as I describe to you my thought process for EQing a vocal or compressing an instrument. It could be a very cool way to teach. And as you know, teaching mixing and production to you and helping you improve is what I'm all about here on this channel. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe because I'm here to help you improve quickly. Now finally, here's one more crazy idea. Not only do I coach mixing and production, but I've also had the opportunity to do performance coaching, working with bands and artists, preparing them for getting on a live stage. Performance anxiety is usually a major hurdle that we have to overcome. Now imagine you need to practice a set of songs for an upcoming performance, and you want to get used to being in front of a crowd. Imagine you can put on your guitar and stand at a microphone in your living room, except visually and auditorily there is a massive crowd in front of you. In fact, you're playing on stage at Wembley Stadium in front of 100,000 fans, responding to your performance in real time, singing along, maybe cheering your name, noticing your mistakes and your successes on stage. Maybe you even have a band with you on the stage that you can interact with. Think of back in the days of Guitar Hero, when you're nailing every note in the song and the crowd in the game is going nuts. Now imagine you don't even need to practice for a performance, but you just want to rock out in front of a large crowd of people, because not everyone's a rock star and will get to experience that in real life. It's not real, but it's freaky to think that you could get an idea in VR of what being on that sort of stage is like. Now imagine that you don't want to be on stage. What if you could attend a concert? What if you could buy one of a limited amount of tickets of an artist that you would love to see live? And you can watch that artist performing for you live on the VR stage. And you're at your VR seat in the crowd enjoying the show. I'm gonna stop that there before it gets out of hand. And Apple, if you're listening and watching, this video is my documentation that you heard it here first, so you know where to send the royalties. Now, the scenarios in this video are speculative and just based off of the potential capabilities of VR technology, so we don't actually know for sure how this will play out. The prospect of working in a digital audio workstation in VR sounds amazing in theory. Is this the future of music production? We don't know for sure, and though I don't think it'll be anytime soon, this thought experiment and this video was very interesting for me to make. And I just think it'll be cool to look back at this video in a decade or two and see how right or wrong I was. Now, with all this in mind, I can't say I don't have concerns over how ethical the shift to VR would be, because we all know how addicting smartphones are. Imagine getting addicted to virtual reality. You see, Apple wants to solve the problem of not everyone being able to have the things they want. We can't have everything we want at the tips of our fingers, especially without years of hard work and dedication. But the Vision Pro may make it seem like we can have everything we want. The fanciest studio to work in, fans that love us, cheering us on. The problem is, it's not real. In the same way that you can burn through your entire motivational reserve for the day by reaching a new level in a video game and not actually accomplishing anything in the real world, spending all your time in VR could make you less motivated to go after the success that you once wanted in the real world. And this can be extremely dangerous. The average person already spends 6 hours a day on their phone. 6 hours. And Apple knows that the market potential for phones and laptops has almost been reached, and it can only do so much. VR is still new and unexplored, and Apple wants to be at the forefront of this exciting technology, not letting others like Facebook take the lead. The Apple Vision Pro seems to be extremely powerful, connecting your whole digital life in front of your eyes on an iCloud system from anywhere in the world without needing to use a computer. How far do we take this? Because the fact that these addiction concerns aren't being talked about in the initial introduction of this product is questionable. If VR does become the trillion-dollar industry it's projected to be one day, whoever controls the blend of virtual and real could control reality for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it will always be up to you whether to put on a headset or sit in a real room with real artists and write a real song on an acoustic guitar, the way we always have and the way that many of us always will. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay on the forefront of music and improve quickly as a producer engineer. I'm really glad to have you here, and if you don't subscribe, I may never see you again, and that would break my heart. Don't forget to leave a comment letting me know what you think of these ideas. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Does it freak you out as much as it does myself? Let me know. My friend, before you go, I'd like to offer you a free gift for spending this time with me. I'd like to give you my ultimate mixing tips and hacks guide completely for free. The link is at the top of the description. This guide is a game changer for producers trying to level up their sound and is filled to the brim with some of my best mixing and production tips that I use every single day as a full-time producer engineer. I've been grateful to get some incredible feedback from producers about the results they're getting with this guide, and I don't want you to miss out on it while it's free, so go grab that now. And as always, I will see you in the next video.